Okay, so now what we want to talk about is the relationship between strategy and innovation. And really where this starts to affect us pretty much straight away is strategy typically provides a couple of different things, but we talk about the provision of some objective or other from strategy, and then some guidelines in terms of the way in which we, for example, allocate resources, the levels of risk we're allowed to have, and so on. But strategy really should be giving us this information, and both of these, by the way, allow us to behave in a particular way around innovation. But there's also, typically in terms of goals, there's an overarching goal, and it can manifest in a number of different ways. But the most common is a graph that looks like this over time, and on this side here has got some kind of metric, whether it's EBT, EBIT, EBITDA, return on investment, return on assets, margin growth, whatever it is that is your particular preference. And what we have on this graph is a time frame. So let's just hypothetically put in a couple of years worth of a picture. Let's say optimistically we are looking at a planning window that's in excess of 5 years, and we may have a chief exec or a board in our organization that says we expect our growth over this period of time to look something like this. Okay, so let's just call this organic growth. It assumes all sorts of things, by the way. So the growth in whatever we are measuring here, whether it's profits or turnovers or volumes or whatever, we assume that growth is not going to be disrupted. We assume that there's not a natural attrition on the products and services in our portfolio, which would actually flatten this curve out. But I'm drawing it in this way for the purposes of demonstration, because there's no benefit in doing it in any other way for the moment. But let's just assume that that's pretty much what our trajectory is going to look like. Now, if that was the case, compared to where we are today, I could actually draw a line that shows no growth. And what we are saying is that at each one of these intersections, I could actually measure the additional amount of profit or revenue we need, and this here, let's call that X, in any particular year, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, that will give me some idea of the increase that I'm required to get from doing more of what I already do. So our strategy will actually give us a goal, which is about trying to improve what we're already doing in such a way that possibly more customers will take up the products and services, possibly will have better throughput, possibly will reduce our cost. Whatever the case, it'll give us this organic growth. And that's fine. The other curve that we might want to look at here is what happens if our board or our shareholders or our chief executive gives us a target that looks more like this over a period of time. So let's say for the moment our expectation in terms of profit is $500 million. You can see that in this particular measure here, we're talking about within 6 years an additional amount of profit of about the same amount, hypothetically, and we therefore have an additional challenge, which let's call that Y, and this, by the way, will appear in every year from this point going out. In each case here, we have an amount of additional benefit, an amount of additional value that has to be generated, which will not come from organic growth. And this, we could call this any number of things, but let's just for the moment just talk about this as being innovation-related growth. And here, what we would be looking at is what's the breakdown in any particular year. So if you were a business unit manager and you were doing the planning for next year, what would the breakdown be in your budget between the amount of cost you would expend and the amount of investment you would make and the actual expectation that you have about revenue? And what's the lead time required between the point at which you actually make the investment and the stage at which the revenue starts to flow in, so that you actually are able to get this in time? Because the suggestion here would be, in order to achieve these various additional increments over time, you'd have to be planning this sometime fairly soon to be able to make those kind of gaps. So this is really the dilemma that most Managers have. Our leaders who have a vision of where we want to be, they've got the blank sheet of paper, they look into the future, they say, this is the volume of trade we want, this is the margin that we expect to have, this is the amount of profit we expect to get, this is the amount of dividend we will distribute to our shareholders, etc., whatever that measure is, and for that reason we need you to achieve these targets. So those are the goals. So I could actually say goals, but also from our point of view we translate that into targets. The guidelines then are going to talk to how much would we invest, what would we invest in, where would we look, where we were not going to look, which markets, which products, which customer segments, and so on. So that's the first thing that relates strategy to innovation, because what we're talking about is this piece here is revenues that currently don't exist, or profits that currently don't exist. So that's the first part.